Hello world, it is 5 p.m. on the dot, Manila. This is an odd time for us. We usually do this at 2:30, but today we have a very special cast of characters. You will meet them very soon, and I think you will like them. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, fellow citizens of work from home, to all of us who are just giving this our best, a very good afternoon to all of you, a very late afternoon to all of you. We have, we thank you for joining us and welcome to another 2 hours of fun. Today is going to be a lot of fun, meaning and impact. This is 100-hour Launchpad CEO Challenge number 11. May I ask each one of you to please join me. Let us begin by uniting in a moment of silence. We honor the men and women of our front lines. Here they are represented in a special way, in a sacred way, by the doctors who have given their lives. Can we linger here a moment? These doctors gave their lives fighting in our medical front lines. I propose, ladies and gentlemen, that we too, you and I, all of us, have our own front lines in this great crisis of humanity. To you and I, a battlefront is entrusted. To you and I, a slice of humanity is entrusted. It is our duty to serve. Please consider this. If you open your mind, if you open your eyes, you will, I promise, find a battlefront, a front line that you alone can fight in your own unique way. What is your front line? You will see that 100-hour Launchpad is very much about this question. What calls you to action? What moves you to impact? So that is why we are here in 100-hour Launchpad. We are on our 11th episode ever since this lockdown started. In every one of them, we have challenged ourselves, along with our guests, people like you, to identify burning needs and screaming wants in your industry. What are your opportunities that demand zero to market fast? So let us begin today's CEO Challenge focused on BPO Ventures in the new normal. We have a wonderful panel of today, gentlemen. They are all boys, I believe 5 of them. You will meet them shortly. I am your host, Andre Yap, founder and CEO of Ignite, House of Innovations, home of innovators. I might look like I'm a serious guy, but maybe in relation to our guest today, I am a serious guy. I must confess, though, that I have so thoroughly enjoyed every one of these CEO challenges. I believe you will too. Along with me, please welcome my co-host, the one and only Miguel Aranaz, managing partner of Ignite House.
Hi, Andre. It's great to be here again. And it looks like we have a full roster of guests today.
Full indeed. We'll see you in a bit, Miguel. Accompanying us, Karen Lopez will lead our magnificent backstage team. Houston, can we have our launch pad, please? We are T-minus 100 hours from liftoff. So a little bit of a background. As you can see, this 100-hour series is presented by Ignite House of Innovation, home of innovators. We are in a unique nexus of these 4 spaces. First, corporate, in that we work with big companies. Number 2, innovation. Equally so, we also work with fast-moving startups and visionary founders. Third, we're in venture capital. We invest our own funds in innovation. And fourth, above all, our core and deepest passion and purpose is to ignite human beings, to ignite people, teams, and organizations to fulfill their greatest potential. You will get a taste of exactly what ignite means in our time together today. If we see the next slide, we have two versions of this 100-hour challenge. Today we are in the open door version. I just wait for the screen to catch up. So as I was saying, we are in the open door version today, focused on BPO. We also have another version of our 100-hour challenge, which is
Andrew, you were muted.
okay. So somebody muted me. Where was I last heard? How long was I muted?
30 seconds ago.
Okay, can we, Houston, can we have our, I do not see our screen. All right, so there are two versions of this, open door and closed door. We are now in the open door version focused on BPO. In the closed door version, it's usually just one company, its CEO, and its management team and employees. So whether closed or open, the goal of these challenges is twofold. One is to jumpstart ideas that are relevant to the sector. Today it's BPO. To jumpstart ideas into living, breathing innovations that make the world a better place. Second, and far more important, is to practice the art and science of going from idea to market fast. Because then if we are so well practiced, then we multiply our ability to make the world a better place again and again and again. When we say 100 hours, that's not to be taken literally. Some innovations will require 2 times or 10 times those hours. Some will require less. The point is being so well practiced in this discipline of sprinting as fast, as lean, and as agile as we can. This is what 100 Hours Launchpad is all about. So, how does this work? Next slide. Our 100-hour challenge begins with these first 2 hours over Google Meets. Our goal here, as I said, is to jumpstart the sprint, to zero in on ideas. The rest of the actual sprint and the launch sequence happens, as in the middle of your screen, in the 100-hour Launchpad app. It's a free app. That's when you take ideas jump-started from here or in some random place after, and you form and reform into smaller teams, and you use the Launchpad app. It's a step-by-step process aided by collaborative algorithms to guide you in sprinting through 8 hurdles. So you and your mates can launch new solutions for the new normal as fast as you can. The third part of this process has to do with funding. We in Ignite House are happy to invest if you start an independent venture or to co-invest if you are a partner. Our criteria is simple. You should meet the 8 hurdles of the 100-hour Launchpad. Now let's get started with the flow of this webcast. You won't see it on screen, but I'll spell it out for you. It's FUN, fun. We will focus, as in the highlighted blue areas, in these 2 hours on the first 5 hurdles, primarily zeroing in on our zones of opportunity. We will map opportunities. No? So how exactly do you and I have fun? Let me now introduce our cast and cadence. Next slide. Okay, we will start by doing solo workouts, all of us here. It will be a timed solo workout. There will be prompts, and that will then be the basis for us to start a peer exchange, led by and kicked off by our lead guest collaborators. There's 5 of them today, and I am very eager for you to meet them. So, next slide. As you will see, we are ready to set to go. Our question again today, our challenge, each and every one of us. If you were to launch something today, a venture, a project, an initiative, or a pivot relating to BPO, what would you be your top priority given the market needs and opportunities in the new normal? Our timer is on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We have an hour and 50 minutes to go. Ready, set, launch. Miguel Arenaz, will you get us started, please?
Yep, I'm here. So, Karen, can we go to the solo workout, please? Okay, so just to give you all some context of what exactly are we going to do, okay? So, the first thing we're going to do is to map to a opportunity. We'll be giving you 4 minutes to answer this sheet that you see over here. Okay, so probably grab a piece of paper, or you can type some things on your phone or your laptop, but we want you to focus on three main, I guess, points. First is, who is your target stakeholder? So based on our 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 topic for today, which is BPO Ventures in the new normal, who would you want to serve? Who are the stakeholders that you'd want to like focus on? So maybe a trick here you can do is actually just to describe who the stakeholder is. You can write it down on your piece of paper. After that, we now want you to understand what are the pain points of these stakeholders. What type of impact do you want to have in their life? So in this case, you might want to focus on some pains, some needs, wants, dreams. All right. So list that down. Again, keep in mind who the stakeholder you wrote like previously. And lastly, we want to use now what we call a delta statement, or focus on your target delta, which is basically using the from to format. When we say from to, it's basically from the current state of where your stakeholders are at to what state do you want to bring them to. Okay, so we'll give you 4 minutes to answer this, and after that, we're going to hear from our guest collaborators. Okay, so do you want to add anything, Andre?
Well, I think I have in the last 45, 50 days of the lockdown kept in touch with CEOs every day. Sometimes it's through these formats, sometimes it's on independent calls. Quite a few of these CEOs have been in BPO, so we are very well aware of the challenges and the opportunities when it comes to BPO. That the key here is there are, and when I talk about opportunities, some of these new ventures, pivots, iterations are already launched in the market, and they're serving their stakeholders very well. The key to pouncing on these opportunities and staying relevant to the market is really these three questions, starting with the target stakeholder. So I really relish the presence of our guests today, and I hope they'll take this sequence to heart. Who's your target stakeholder? What's your target impact in terms of their pains, needs, wants, and aspirations? And let's get that to a from-to statement that clearly maps out how and where the opportunities are. So I look forward to this, Miguel. If Houston is ready, we're going to set our timer. Ready, set. Okay, guys, you got 4 minutes. Everyone should do this. I don't know if one of our guests, Jonathan De Luzuriaga, is just trying to talk trash here, but he's saying he's finished already. So the other four guys better catch up. No trash talking, huh? Okay, we're down to the last 90 seconds. All right, we are done.
Mm-hmm.
If we could invite Houston to show the questions again. Well, no, that's fine. That's fine. Let's. So, guys, a couple of process things here. Why 4 minutes? That's relatively fast, no? If we gave you 40 minutes or 4 hours, I'm not sure that the results would necessarily change drastically. One of the process lessons, practices we want to do here is involve everyone in a faster, more uncomfortable pace than they're used to. Let's see what this turns out, okay? Before we hear from everybody else, we're going to take a slight detour. And let me start this detour by asking Houston to take us through a story that shares with you our own answers in Ignite to these three questions. For example, so Houston, okay. So this is a site called 100hours.vc. This site, nor its idea or vision, did not exist before the lockdown. Everything about this site and everything that happened here happened during the lockdown. Why? Houston, can we stay upstairs, please? No scrolling, Houston. Okay. Why? Because our answer to the first question of who is our target stakeholders and what was our target impact, in other words, their pains. I want to share this with you by way of example. No? Our target stakeholder in Ignite has always been business leaders. This means CEOs, they're 1 downs, they're 2 downs, they're 3 downs. So it's senior management. And the pains that we knew was coming was threefold in this time of pandemic. How do they refocus their teams when there's a lot of panic, hysteria, getting overwhelmed, getting paralyzed? Number 2, how do they reorganize when all that is familiar, their operations, their value chain is now all business unusual? And number 3, the crux of it all, how do they respond and launch solutions fast in a matter of days? These were the three pains that we focused on. And based on that, we launched, including, now we can scroll down, please. I want to show you 12 milestones that resulted in this. So these are all innovations. Milestone 1, milestone 2, if we could scroll down, please, Houston. We've launched all these solutions in the last 40 days just by staying true to our answers to these three questions. And you are experiencing one of these solutions, which is the 100-hour Launchpad. In a few days, as the enhanced community quarantine finally lifts, or maybe it won't, we are launching a new solution, the latest solution, which is called Restart. It's software as a service. It will allow CEOs to restart, first and foremost, not their business, not their teams, but their people. If you have 100 people, you have 10,000 people, that's what we will allow you to do. Take care of your people so that they can take care of your business. For now, I want to invite you to one of the solutions that we launched. Houston, can we go to Iggy Jr., please? Okay, so this is an application that has an itinerary, and right now I want to take us to GPS navigation. This is part of our detour, ladies and gentlemen. So can we go to the definition of GPS, please? Next, okay. So in Ignite, if you will stay with me here for another 3 minutes, please. We have this thing called GPS, Genius Purpose Service, or simply GPS. If we know our GPS, then we have our own deeply personal navigation system for life. GPS will continuously lead us where we need to go, who we are called to be, for whom. It does not matter what success we achieve in life. Our path to joy and meaning goes through GPS, but only if we pay attention. If any of you remember Waze, Waze cannot help us if we're not paying attention to Waze. It's the same thing with GPS. So if we can scroll down, please. Every day we are revealed new data points and coordinates, new pieces of our own puzzle to the constellation of who am I, why am I here, and what was I born to do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is very much relevant to our solo workout. And in a minute, I will show you why. Next, please. So right now, I would like us to focus on two questions. We will give you a minute to consider these two questions. The first question is labeled number 2 here. Life as we know it can change so drastically in only a few hours, days, or weeks. The world has so many new needs in our new normal. The question is, what can I give? What is it in me that is good, that is gifted, that remains in me no matter how much the world changes, that will allow me to stay relevant and keep being a force for good, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and for many tomorrows after? My friends, I would like to invite you to ponder on this question. You don't have to answer it on a piece of paper or through words. Just let it sink in. Keywords might come to you, images might come to you, but soak it in. I promise you, you will find its relevance and its force throughout the rest of this afternoon. We'll give you 60 seconds to dwell on this question, please. And one. Okay, so now let's move on to a second question. Number seven. Okay, so I remember that one of our guests, Jonathan de Zuriaga, said immediately in the solo workout he was done. I would like him and all of us to consider and reconsider the solo workout in the context now of these two questions. This is the second question. What pains have I encountered most meaningfully in my own life? How have my pains been a gift because they allowed me to care deeply? How have my pains moved me to empathy, knowing the pain of others? How have my pains moved me to compassion, knowing the pain of others and so wanting to act on it? How has my pains moved me to love, knowing the pains of others and so wanting to give the very best in myself to heal their pain? Again, don't try to answer it intellectually. Let the keywords and images come to you. Soak it up. Dwell on this question. Let's spend 60 seconds here, please. Okay, that ends our detour to GPS. Now, Houston, can you lead us back to the solo workout? Okay, let's go back to the solo workout. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's go back. We'll spend 2 minutes on this. I invite you, in fact, I challenge you to revisit these same questions. I hope you will stay open. How might your answers to these questions have changed, shifted, or maybe have come to a point of new emphasis based on our GPS detour and those two questions we asked ourselves? I challenge you to stay open to this. Let's give ourselves 2 minutes, and then we will hear straight away from our guest collaborators. 2 minutes, Houston. Here we go. We are down to now our most favorite part. So bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at your upper left-hand corner of your screens, we still have an hour and a half, 90 minutes to work with each other and find launchable ventures. Now it is time to do our peer exchange after our solo workout. To lead us in our peer exchange is our esteemed panel of guests. Miguel, it's a handful of names. It's a mouthful of names, so you're going to have to help me here. If I might also invite our partners, Joanna, Alberto, to help us also with our guests, calling on them one by one as they share their answers to our questions based on their many, many years of youthful experience in the BPO sector. A few ground rules. We are going to be very focused here, especially since we have many guests. Well, we will have a timed roundtable where we hear from our guests specifically about their answers to the questions. If they are heading the right way, you will hear this. And if they are not answering our questions, you will hear this. So ladies and gentlemen, Joanna, Miguel, can you help us call on, I think let's get started with one of our friends here in Ignite who has accompanied us through many journeys. So he knows how we do this. I personally am very grateful for his constant presence and today for bringing his friends along with us. Dan Reyes, could you please unmute your mic and join us and give us your take on the challenge questions. Dan, welcome.
Hi, Andre. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
All right.
So, for the target stakeholders, most definitely, the nearest and dearest to me is my fellow IT BPO knowledge workers. There's about 1.3 million of us here in the Philippines. And if you count even the quasi-industries that support this industry, there's probably about 5 million. And the reason why well, of course, I chose them is it's, having conversations with my former teams. I feel the anxiety, I feel the fear of them, of course, not working, and if there is actually work to go back to, those are the things that are really, topics of conversation. And having seen some of the prospects of, of course, it's not going to be normal anymore. But even then, some of the pronouncements that only about 50% of our workforce can actually go back after the quarantine period. And of course, hopefully it accelerates and comes back to the numbers that we have. It still is quite a big issue, both personally and of course collectively as an industry. And so that I believe is the one that's driving me really to find ways and means, together of course with my esteemed colleagues here, in finding a solution for us to get the industry back soon as possible, and to be able to not only maybe just to go back, but also to create more opportunities. And I'm sure that there are been attending a lot of webinars lately, seeing also the opportunities that are coming, I think coming our way, and how to be able to capture that. So from that point of view, my target, from the Delta situation, I think where I'd like to bring it is from, from a point of anxiety to a point of optimism, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a platform that can help in doing so.
Dan, thank you for that. Let me
Thank you.
let me post a few follow-up questions now.
Sure.
So we're looking at 1.3, 1.4 million BPO workers at 50% utilization right now. We're talking about jobs at risk in the range of 600, 700,000
Mhm.
Filipinos, no? Are there particular sectors or strata of BPO workers that are particularly vulnerable in this new normal?
Yeah, I think it's particularly, and I think my colleague Jojo Ligan can even speak further on this. But I believe on the contact center side, on the back office side, there's a lot in IT and all the other sectors. There is that there has been more of people that can actually work from home, right? Unfortunately, for some sectors that would require either certain systems or even clients requiring such that they be on a specific site. That and then becomes the issue is because if you cannot go to the site, then you'll not be able to provide that type of service.
So
And
then to be specific, the 700,000 jobs that might be at risk is a function not of diminished demand, but of diminished capacity to continue to fulfill demand because they simply cannot physically. There's not enough business continuity measures to allow them to continue to service that demand. Is that correct?
no, that's correct from my point of
Okay.
view.
All right. Okay. So it's very important as we spend these next hours in search of a solution that we become very pinpoint in understanding the problems.
Right.
I thank you very much, Dan, for setting up us down the right track. Um, we will circle back to you as we. So Dan, maybe because you know these gentlemen much better than we do, can you tell us who should go next?
Is I Well, since we're talking about contact centers, I'd probably start first with Jojo Uligan, who's the president of the Contact Center Association of the Philippines.
Jojo, welcome to 100 Arts Launchpad CEO Challenge.
Welcome. I'm not surprised Dan will call me. I saw it coming.
So, Jojo, you heard about the exchange. I think Dan has put you in some sort of corner and some sort of context. You are free, of course, to bring up your own stakeholder. I wonder if your stakeholder and your target impact, meaning your pains, are different from what Dan brought up. But feel free to openly and candidly share with us your response to the challenge.
So, I'll just add to what Dan, no? It's actually one of my stakeholders, well, the people. But since Dan already talked about the people, let me talk about my stakeholders being the members of the association, the different companies operating here in the Philippines. That's my I would say my major stakeholder at the moment. To add to what Dan's saying, the problem is more on the guidelines, not clear enough on how we can execute having this pandemic, hit us. Not clear, I would say, guidelines from government, from other agencies, even from our partners, primarily because, again, there's a lot of factors affecting it. We're not ready for one. Infrastructure, to be very specific, in each of our agents' place, if they want to work from home. I guess that answers the question that a lot of our clients have been telling us, and we've been telling government and others that we need to fix your connectivity, right? To the new norm that everyone has been talking about, is not really new norm. I will challenge that because work from home has been in existence for how many years? In fact, in 2003, I started to work at home. I have 150 agents. right? But then you don't have the right process in place, you don't have the guidelines, the regulations, and people are not used to, Filipinos are not used to working at home, right? It only changes like about what, 7, 10 years ago when all of this, online work being offered here in the Philippines. But technology is already available. It's just not, we're not ready here in the Philippines, right? The different call center companies operating in the Philippines are ready to execute work from home. In other geographies, for example, in the U.S., it's already being used for many years already, and it's, I would say, the market for work at home is already matured, right? So it has, created, the pandemic created a lot of business impact, behavior issues with people, and challenges a traditional way of doing business in the Philippines, right? That's a problem, right? The opportunity, though, would be how do we then transition from the normal or traditional way of doing BPO contact center work here in the Philippines to a hybrid model. A hybrid, it's a combination of your on-site operations plus your work at home, right? Definitely, to Dan's point earlier, you cannot operate everything on a work at home. There will be clients who wanted to operate on site primarily because of certain compliance, regulations, security, and all those other things, right? So you cannot do financial services for one, not into work at home, right? Because you'll be accessing data and information that their subscriber or people not really, I would say, comfortable being accessed outside of a certain office that with the right monitoring system, security, cameras, everything in place. So how do we then transition that? What percentage of the business that we're currently doing that we will transition to work at home? So that's it.
So, Jojo, thanks for that. So you're basically, your zone of opportunity is zeroing in on hybrid models, no?
Yeah.
That allow for whatever needs on-site versus work from home. I wonder, and I'll just drop it here, and we can look back to it later on, if in the grander scheme of things, the recalibration should maybe include on-site, work from home, but also to what extent does this accelerate the world of artificial intelligence and robotics that we've all been hearing about for so long? No? So I just introducing that to the equation as part of this opportunity mapping, and we can certainly look back to that later on. No? There are no clear-cut answers, but let's hold on to that for now. At this point, to Jojo and to Dan, this is what we have to say to you. So thanks for leading us down the right path. Jojo, the baton is yours to pass. Who should come next?
Let me pass it on to the smallest guy. No, I'll give it to the Emperor Alvin, because his industry pretty much represent the gaming development, wherein I think there's huge opportunity for doing work at home. Alvin?
Awesome. Alvin, are you there? Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Can't hear you, Alvin.
Alvin, you gotta unmute your mic. Still can't hear you.
Okay, now can you hear me now?
Yep.
Is that you, Alvin?
Yeah, is this
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
okay? So,
Alvin, welcome to 100R Launchpad. We are so eager to hear from you. So, what's your spin from the game developers' perspective of things?
well, listening to Jojo's debacle, actually in game development in our industry, which is non-pogo, all right,
Okay. All right.
clarify that. We found it quite easy to do work from home. I mean, it was like it was meant for most of us. We do have a section of actually a large number of our membership which does customer support for games, but they also were prepared. I think they were preparing since December for this eventuality right when it popped out in China. So those members easily transitioned to work from home scenario. But the pain point that has been bugging me is actually on the academic side. You see, we have 25% of our members is the academe, and they are so hard hit. And
Sorry, could you back up, Alvin?
yeah.
What does game developers academe mean?
Game development is actually taught as a 4-year baccalaureate course in a good number of universities, and I can imagine what else is happening in the academic front. They don't know when they're going to open, and of course the students are having a grand time not doing crap. It's fun for them now, but what does that leave us, the employers? When they come to graduate, they'll be part of our population of students that missed out on because of the ECQ, this extension of ECQ. That is painful. It doesn't hurt now, but it will hurt us in the end. So game development, our advantage is we play and use around with a lot of technology. That's what we do. And for me, as one of the elders there, I think we should try to provide at least a path to solve this problem. Okay, there must be a way to alleviate or help this impending education gap that we're going to get in the Philippines.
Alvin, can I ask you some questions by way of connecting some dots here?
Okay.
Houston, can you help us with a split screen, please? Can we do a split screen with Alvin? Alvin, so I don't know if I'm questioning down the right path here, but let's try to connect some dots here.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, is your sense that there is enough demand out there globally? Because I assume that GDAP serves mostly a global market, right? It's not a local.
Correct. That is correct.
Right. So the global demand for games, digital is one of the industries and environments that must be flourishing right now with everybody at home, right? We know that. So if anything, no? Well, if anything, the point is global demand for GDAPers, for Philippine game developers and game, the back support that we offer the global game development industry. Is there more demand out there that we can service? Question number one.
Well, definitely. But I've been asked this question so many times over the last 10 years because game development is still a very small field, and at the end of the ball game, my answer on why our growth is not as explosive as the other countries is bad education.
So it goes back to your question, to your pain point right now, which has only been exacerbated by the COVID situation, which prevents.
Correct. It's going to happen again. Yeah.
So my next question, therefore, is help us understand game development in the context of the back office support we provide to the world from the Philippines. When you say game development, is it predominantly that we have developers here developing technically games, or you also happen to mention tech support or customer support? What is the expanse? And my question really is, to what extent, how long is the onboarding pathway to get more Filipinos into your industry? Does it really, because it's one thing to develop games. I can see that yeah, it's gonna take a bit more pathway for that for some random Filipino like me to get to become a game developer. But if it's providing tech support or customer support for the game development industry, that might be a shorter path. So help us understand the expanse and the latag of the scope of game development solutions as we are providing it from the Philippines. Where are the possible supply side opportunities that we might be able to divert? You know, there's going to be millions of Filipinos. In the US, the unemployment number is 26 million freaking Americans.
Wow.
Yes, unemployed in the last 5 weeks.
5 weeks, yeah.
In the last 5 weeks, 26 million Americans have been unemployed. So whatever the corresponding number of Filipinos are that are unemployed, how many of them can we quickly onboard and flow into what you do in the game development expanse of the Filipinos servicing this space? Or does it really take a long runway of I have to have multiple years and degrees of education in this space in order to? Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, so definitely the most number of, if you count the number of employees, it will definitely be in the game support sector. So that's easily understood by this group. You have a bunch of companies doing support specifically for games. Okay, so that's their expertise. Then the rest of us, which is the
Sorry, what percentage is doing game support?
actually by numbers, if numbers of employees,
Yeah.
wow, that's probably, my goodness, 50% or maybe even 60%.
So
Yeah.
somebody, Alvin, somebody like me,
Mhm.
how long will it take me to be able to do game support the way that 50% is doing? I know nothing. Is that very highly technical? Do I really need an education in order to do game support? Or can you train me and in 10 days get me out there and servicing?
No, it'll take a longer time than that. The way I understand my members, their type of business relies on familiarity with games, with certain kind of games, especially which game they're servicing. That can't be taught in 10 days. You have to remember in GDAP, we're a very, very small group. When we say a company has 300 people, that's huge. That's huge for us. You know, that's nothing to Jojo Oligan. but for us, a company is 300. That's huge already. So these are the kinds of accounts that they have in game support.
Okay.
But yeah, but the rest of us, the ones who develop, yes, we do develop games from beginning to end, from the design to the graphics to the programming. We do it on all platforms as well.
Right, because when you mentioned that your particular stakeholder was the people in the academe, in other words, the people who teach and, in a sense, onboard our Filipino brothers and sisters into this game development field to serve the whole world. The opportunity for them might be opening up if there was a way to bring for them to digitally through the web translate their go ahead.
What I want to push is to use what we know and what we have right now. For example, I have one school in mind, which is a perfect candidate. Which I think is a perfect candidate for this. They want to transition a lot of their materials online. Guys, I'm sure in this group we know what e-learning is. They've always wanted to do that, but they're not the richest school. They're right in the middle. They've always had this conversation, but they've never put resources to it because they don't have it. In the past few years, because of K-12, schools have lost most of their resources because of K-12. They can't really invest in these large-scale projects. But now COVID hit. It's even worse now. Now, I think from our expertise in game development, just because a lot of us do service work for education and training designs as well, that we can, find a pathway to to develop not just game development lessons. That's not my point.
Okay.
To build school lessons. You know what they need to teach, not just for game developers, but for general education. This should be the time.
Yeah.
We have to hit it and hit it now.
Yeah. Okay. Very well said.
Mm.
Alvin, thank you. So the baton is yours, Alvin. Who's next?
Oh, definitely. Master Yoda, the president of the Software Association, is next. JDL, Jonathan Uriaga, you're next.
Thank you, Sensei Yoda. Hey, Andre, how are you? Good evening to all
Jonathan,
the...
good evening. Don't make me pronounce your last name.
Yeah,
I used to be good at it, but I'm getting old. So from game development, we go to software development. What's the scene like in your space? Who's your target stakeholder, and what's your target impact?
Andre, I'm a little bit of,
Joining us from Manila.
I'm actually now in Rojas City in Capiz.
Aha.
So
Welcome. Yeah.
I'm a little bit of in some sort of disadvantage here because I'm the youngest and I'm the most good looking of all your guests.
Okay. Yeah.
So
We forgive you.
and then I represent the software industry, which is probably the oldest among all of the industry associations. We've been going at it for 32 years. And again, it was some sort of scare that actually brought all the software developers together to form a community. And that was the Y2K issue, right? That's
Yeah.
why the Philippines
That's how old
decided,
you are.
huh?
That's how old you are.
So no, actually, I was still in elementary then when that hit. So no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, going through my stakeholders, you might be surprised that I'm not just going to zero in on the software development shops here in the Philippines, but I'm actually going to cast a much wider net and go the direction of Dan and his chosen stakeholders as well, which is the entire IT BPM sector. Why am I going to choose them? Primarily because all of these IT-enabled services right now is actually powered by software. You know, software enables us to receive calls coming from the other side of the globe. You want to make a game, you still have to go through a couple of software. You want to go into healthcare information management, that's still software as well. Later on, you're going to be hearing from Miguel, who's president of the Animation Council. And when you do cartoons, technically you use software as well. So that is technically the stakeholder that I'd like to zero in on. And the opportunity that I could see even post-COVID. That's why when I chatted a while ago that I was already finished, I wasn't actually kidding. Primarily because I think I speak for all my friends this afternoon as well. We've been facing the challenges of the industry of our respective sectors for the past couple of decades. So we practically know it like the back of our hand, right? So one of the things that I think is going to appear as an opportunity is pretty much along the lines of facilities. Right now, we have very limited movement because of the enhanced community quarantine. And my industry per se is not exempted from that as well. One of the reasons that I want to zero in on of an opportunity in facilities, because across the board, all over the world, they're saying the industries that are going to be hampered would be maritime, travel and tourism, and then real estate. I beg to disagree on the fourth one, although there are going to be major adjustments. Like right now, because of social distancing, the usual requirement from us by government, which is about 6 meters for Philippine Economic Zone accredited facility, is probably going to be much larger now.
6 meters? And then larger?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, primarily because, especially industries like Jojo Oligan, for instance, that basically holds the lion's share of all our numbers collectively.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people coming in and out, right? When one team goes on break and you cram up into an elevator and so on and so forth, basically you throw social distancing out of the window.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I could see as an opportunity is actually what I call SCE, or self-contained environments. You see, Andre, if we were configured this way pre-COVID, then I don't think we're going to be as hampered as we are right now as an entire industry. Uh, a lot of the industry players, including the large software development companies, are actually spending so much right now for their housing and for their transportation, just so they could keep their head above water and service some of the clients that are what do you call this? The geographies that we are currently servicing.
Jonathan, Jonathan, by that you mean including ano, no? Housing them in hotels or quasi-hotel type properties where that's where they live and work, no?
I think the offices post-COVID would require something like that. So aside from much larger workstations, there's going to be facilities that they need to sleep in case another pandemic erupts. Because now we're talking about, honestly, we don't really know anything about what's going on, right?
True.
There's going to be a second wave. Some people are saying there's going to be a third wave. No, not until there is a cure, which is, if we're going to believe the experts, it's about 16 to 18 months away. Would we really settle into normal as normal would have it, right?
Yeah.
So another thing that pains me, well, it's probably going to jumble a little bit the approach that I'm taking, but we are a very services-oriented country, Andre. No, from contact center to software, we made a survey within the members of the PSIA, and I have about 163 members. The biggest of the big and the smallest of the small are actually part of our community. Lo and behold, 96% are actually doing services. Now, here's the catch. This is not a Philippine-centric problem. This is a global problem. So now I've been hearing horror stories, even from my ranks, that some of the companies that they have long-term relationships with are having difficulty in trying to keep their head above water because of this crisis. And that is because we are so dependent on providing services, and there's very little activities like what we're doing right now in terms of ideation, so that we could create our own products that in turn could be distributed across the globe. So my to and from, and because I'm a very diligent student, from services going to products, and then from a typical office space, it's now going to go down into what I call a self-contained environment. And I'd just like to bring this to the attention of my co-panelists. The clapping of hands is actually louder than with me than the other speakers now. So I just want to rub that in.
Jonathan, wonderful. What I liked about it, it was very well delivered, and you got to the essence of it. We feel the pain, but more than the pain, we feel the potential of, let's just focus, and there's a way out of this, and there's a way out of this that makes all of us better because it makes us focus finally on the right things. No? So hold your horses, Jonathan, in Rojas City. That's near, is that Iloilo or Bacolod or Negros?
We're in the same island as Iloilo, and about 3 hours drive is Boracay. So I live in a very ugly place. It's a beautiful place here. Beautiful.
Great. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm glad you were able to give us that slice of your universe. Thank you. Who's next? Jonathan, who do you pass the baton on to?
I'm going to pass it to my good friend who draws a lot. So the president of the Animation Council of the Philippines, somebody I look up to because he's about 20, 30 years older than me. So Mr. Miguel Del Rosario. Okay.
Jonathan, if only a middle finger can talk, right? No. Okay. Yeah.
Manong Miguel, welcome to 100 Hours Launchpad.
Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi.
Yeah.
So, who's your target stakeholder?
stakeholders really are the artists that are suffering right now. No, one, I all the other panelists mentioned something that's sort of like a common ground for this industry. Okay, one, two things that are very the Filipinos are quite comfortable with or are known for is service and creativity. Okay. On top of that, in my studio itself, only 65% of our artists have not finished 4 year, in other words, university or college. Okay. But the Philippines is known in the animation world, and I'm talking about global animation world. Okay. And like right now, my clients, okay, the Disneys of this world, first world, they are 80% enabled work from home. In our case, we are only 30% enabled work from home. Not only that, the production rate of production out of that 30% has significantly dropped. Yet, touch wood, none of my clients have jumped ship. None of my clients have said, you know what, Miguel, tough luck. Sorry, I'm moving out of your studio. Essentially, I think it's all because of credibility. We have been professional with them. They like the way we work. They like our quality. And as a result of that, it's very painful to see that I personally, okay, my company, have to shoulder to give allowances to 140 artists who the government was not able to provide to. In other words, out of our own pockets, out of our own savings, yes, our regular workers are still drawing salary. Our freelancers are drawing salaries, the ones who are productive. But we have 140 that's not able to work because of connectivity problems. So
Okay.
these people no money at all. So, but the problem is, these are the very talented people who fit in the glove, of service and creativity, and they have a lot to contribute to the economy and also obviously to themselves. No.
So Miguel, let me clarify. So when you talk about these, you mentioned 140 in your case, no? In your specific case, so not this is not the entire expanse of the animation industry. It's just your direct people. It's not a question of demand. Demand is still there.
Oh, demand is definitely there, especially now. You mentioned that.
So it's a function of just the physical infrastructure that precludes them from continuously and sustainably delivering work from home, whether it's internet or the home environment, etc. So might you therefore again be talking along the lines of what Jonathan was talking about in terms of creating physical spaces that allow, in this case, your animators to continue providing for the demand that is still out there?
Definitely.
Okay.
Ideal state is work from home. Okay. However, we really need stable and strong bandwidth because the uploading and downloading of files is just so heavy that the pocket Wi-Fi's forget it. And that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
That's the ideal state. Now, next to that would be the self-contained places, and that could be regional. That could be even internet cafes. That could be digital clusters, co-work spaces. Inject them with softwares and the proper hardware, and those could be mini studios.
Got it. All right, Miguel. I think. Well, here you go. That is for Miguel and our 5 gentlemen. I believe there's nobody left, right? From our.
There's one more, Andre.
There's one more. Sorry.
One more.
Okay, so who do we pass the baton on to? Miguel, can you do us the honors?
Of course, I would like to welcome Butch Valenzuela, definitely.
Good afternoon, Andre. Thank you, Miguel,
Butch,
I
good
guess-
afternoon. I owe you my sincerest apologies. I did not realize. I lost track. Usually, we BPO being so big, usually we're up to 3 or 4 guest collaborators. So, Butch, you are the last, but not certainly not the least. We look forward to hearing from you. Welcome to 100 Hours Launchpad.
Thank you very much. I guess if you go look at my target stakeholders, there are, you mentioned really 3 words in the GPS navigation, which is really empathy, compassion, and love. And when you go look at, the US today, as you said, there were about 27 million people that have actually applied for unemployment.
Yes.
And a big part of that are, believe it or not, are people that work in hospitals. And you'd say, well, this is a pandemic. Why would nurses, doctors be furloughed or laid off by the hospitals? And hospitals actually, some of the hospitals actually are in dire straits. And the reason for it is really, hospitals have been preparing for the COVID pandemic. And because of that, how hospitals really make money are really in the elective surgeries, in the, other things like cancer patients and the normal people that go to hospitals. Well, for 2 reasons, people don't like to go to hospitals for fear that they are actually going to get sick, which is really an irony, right? And when you really think about the United States, today the US has about 76 million baby boomers. So here's my target stakeholders from this set, which really, when you think about it, not only helps the client base, but really helps our people here, our nurses, and even our doctors to be able to work. Okay? Think about it this way. In the Philippines, nursing is a good, it's a fantastic profession, but people actually take up nursing to go abroad. Let's face it, right?
Yeah.
So in the call center industry, there are a lot of nurses or clinical folks simply because these clinical folks are paid better in the call center industry. Okay, so 65% of my business is really in healthcare. And today, because it is majority in healthcare, we've had clients that have actually said, well, we're going to furlough people. So we don't know where you actually stand. We'd rather actually hire our own people than pay an outsourcer to do this.
Right.
So there are issues, okay, which is really contrary to the thinking that because this is a pandemic, that healthcare is actually going to survive. Given that, I guess, premise, there are 2 stakeholders in mind for me. One are the baby boomers, the elderly in the US. And then secondly, because we cater to the baby boomers, it would be our nurses, our people here in the Philippines that are able to talk to these folks. When you think about it, a lot of the elderly today, because of the fear of, the outside, what's going on in the outside world, and a lot of them are in homes, that a lot of them are dying in homes, it would be great for them to be able to talk to somebody, right?
I see where you're going with this. Keep going.
You could actually come up with a method by which, you have the elderly that can talk to our nurses here, or not even nurses, just even call center agents, and not do necessarily clinical work, okay, because it's illegal to be able to diagnose or provide treatment. So tell him, unless you have a US license, you really can't do it. But you can certainly talk to people that are in need of somebody to talk to, right?
Yeah.
My thinking is if you could put those two constituents together, have them be able to talk to each other, you could actually have a way by which you could, for us to make money here. I mean, after all, all the guys that you have here, it's not only empathy and compassion, but we also need to make money. We are a business, right? But then look at it from this perspective. If you can provide a business that could help people out in this new norm of this world, would it be a great thing to be able to provide, people with a way to voice their fears, right?
Got
And
it.
the end result,
I think we understand where you're going with this, Butch. Very well done.
so the end result is really just be able to have compassion, empathy, and love.
Very well. That's Butch. Thank you very much. We're certainly going to circle back to that. That I would have to give that the badge of the most original of the thinking we've heard so far. Miguel, as in Miguel Aranaz of Ignite. Before we turn it over to our audience with their own zones of opportunities, did you have comments or feedback, patterns you might have recognized from our lead collaborators?
Well, there's sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm there. Yeah. Well, what Butch said is actually interesting. He took a different approach to what the other guest collaborators shared. So I'd actually want to explore that a little bit more as well. But just the breadth of the stakeholders we got from the 5 other collaborators, it's probably been the most diverse bunch of stakeholders we've encountered in our webcast. So that's something I'd probably the gaming thing was really interesting only because of because of how it can be applied to education and online learning. So that caught my eye.
Yeah, I think the diversity is certainly there. What I have to congratulate and give kudos to our, I was much warned. It's not like in the last 3 days, it's one person or another would call me and you that panel that you have on Tuesday with these guys from the BPO industry, you better be careful because they're a rowdy bunch of guys. But I didn't see the rowdiness. I think they brought their A game today.
Oh, definitely.
And they brought us what I would say are very well thought out, but also very heartfelt. They have their boots on the ground when they bring us the stakeholders. So
Definitely.
why don't we now expand this to our audiences and see if they might see this marketplace of BPO and opportunities in BPO from the angle of their own lens. No? So we're now going to open up the peer exchange. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we are still, as we're training our eyes into the BPO sector, we are still in the space where we're mapping what we call zones of opportunities. Where are the opportunities? Where are the biggest opportunities? So right now, as we've heard from our lead challengers, we now want to hear from the audience in terms of their own solo workouts. I did, if I could call on a few people here, and they might be able to respond to some of the issues that were brought up, for example, by, very well encapsulated by Jonathan De Luzuriaga, who he is the president of the Software Association of the Philippines. But it echoes the concerns of Dan Reyes and Jojo Uligan with regards to bringing the workers, the 1.4 million workers that are involved in this industry, back to work, and the infrastructure and physical logistics of just doing that. No, we have from our audience, we gave a couple of inside passes to a few people, and I want to call on them now to see if they might have interesting views on how we can address this particular problem of, for example, in the BPO space, we have right now 700,000 jobs and counting that are threatened because we cannot physically return to work. Is David Foot around of Xenia?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here, Andre.
David, you've been looking at this problem for the last, obsessed about it in the last 40 days. If you could tell us a little bit about Xenia and how you are looking at this problem of returning Filipinos to work, and in the context of BPO, just to give you context, again, it's a 1.4 million Filipino professionals involved in this. And about half of that is not able to physically return to work and therefore fulfill the demand that continues to be there. What solutions and opportunities are you seeing in this with regards to this particular space? And as I call on you, David, I'd also like to maybe bring in a back and forth between you and is Greg Kittleson around?
I'm not sure if he's here.
I thought
Yes, sir, I'm here. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here.
So Greg Kittleson is the K of KMC, which is Southeast Asia's biggest shared office spaces. So I believe these guys have been talking. So if you could help us address this challenge, which is actually a physical challenge of returning Filipino professionals to work. BPO continues to be a compelling industry and sector that provides jobs for Filipinos, but now we are physically constrained to the tune of 700,000 Filipino workers. So what solutions, if anything, are we seeing in the marketplace right now in terms of physically returning our Filipino professionals to work? David, Greg, maybe you could help us.
Sure. So a little bit of background on Xenia. Xenia is a mobile healthcare platform, and we're focused on continuity of care, sending nurses to people's homes, and also telemedicine. We're looking sort of an end-to-end digital solution around healthcare. So as Andre said, for the last month or so, we've been really looking at this problem of return to work as one of the primary problems that we wanted to solve. And actually, to give you a bit of background, we had to solve this first internally for ourselves, because as we send healthcare workers to see patients in people's homes, we needed a way to first of all protect their health as well as our patients, right? The issue we were trying to tackle is, if we send a nurse to your home to do a blood draw or vaccination, how do we know that that nurse is not COVID positive? How do we know that the driver of that nurse is not COVID positive? So, the solution that we looked at in terms of the broader solution first started off from our internal solution. And so the way we approach this as a mobile and data company is around using mobile data in order to come up with statistics to allow us to manage the process. And just to sort of give you a high level overview, we ask all of our providers to do an online survey, a screening for COVID, but it's unlike the ones maybe you've seen from Apple or CDC. This is attached to their employee record and to their health record. So what we look at is a clearance for work every day that's managed online through their mobile app. And then we've also done a digitization of temperature records. So for example, when we look at a nurse going online, it has to be both her online screen, as well as a third party validating her temperature, and that being part of her digital health passport, right? And so the solution we've been conceptualizing is a mobile digital passport, a health passport that allows you to sort of give clearance and access to workplaces. And then now we're looking at this in the broader context of how do we do this for enterprises, right? Our feeling is that the COVID problem is it's partly symptomatic. We think in the post-COVID world that any form of symptom or illness requires special treatment, right? Whether you have a headache or a fever or anything else, it's no longer a simple issue, right? Is it possibly something that's COVID related? Is it not COVID related? How many days of quarantine before you can come back in? These are all complex questions that we felt are best handled through a digital platform, because the larger the company, the greater the complexity, right?
To put this in context, ground this in reality, David. This week, you were telling me over the weekend that you are doing pilots with the enterprises that you're talking about. Can you give us the scale and scope of pilots that you're running this week? In terms of number of employees covered and expansive things. Ladies and gentlemen, before I allow David to continue on, because so much of the BPO constraints right now, at least in the immediate term, is physical, being able to go to work. The solutions that David's talking about, and at this point, I have to do what do you call that? A transparency act. Ignite is an investor in Xenia. However, I will qualify that by saying that in the many years that I've been involved in the venture space in the Philippines, I have never met a product guy, a technologist like David. He's an A1 guy, and quite frankly, somebody who cares as much about what he's doing as this guy. The reason why we bring him on board today is not to sell anything to anybody, but David is really at the forefront of, if it's not just BPO who needs to return to work physically. It's corporation after corporation after corporation that has hundreds, thousands of people. And there's no reason why these corporations need to be setting up COVID operations and operating that themselves. Because this is not a matter of one-time testing. It's a matter of testing, monitoring, tracking, and keeping the workplace free and healthy of COVID, so that we can continue to deliver our solutions to the marketplace. And it shouldn't be the case that every one of us should be figuring that out by ourselves. There should be one expert or a couple of experts in the marketplace, and we should be turning to them for solutions. And Xenia is at the forefront of this. So just to ground this in reality, David, what's the scale and scope of pilots that you're running this week, for example, the next 2 weeks, in terms of turning these solutions into grounded, proven realities?
So this week we're looking at a manufacturing company with about 5,000 employees, and that includes manufacturing, warehouses, and so on. Next week we're looking at a bank that covers all the Philippines, that's 700 different outlets. And that's sort of for the first two. And we're also looking at a pharmaceutical next week as well, with a corporate head office and a financial company. So we're doing a couple big, a couple small.
That's the scale, David. So that's several thousand Filipino professionals. What's the scope of things? Let's say, what's the top 3 or 4 scope of activities that you are providing for them that might be transferable to the BPO sector in terms of physically returning their professionals to work?
Yeah. So the top thing is we're looking at entry access. We're trying to come up with a way to monitor through the daily online screens, as well as the temperature checks, not just the temperature checks at the guard, but digitally managed and part of the employee record. So we're looking at the access to the buildings from those two perspectives. We're also performing COVID tests using the rapid antibody test, and that's also sort of a medical record that's backed and connected to these things. And then we're looking at shift planning and contact tracing as well. So we're really putting it all in one package to try to simplify the entirety of the process around accessing who can come in and who can't based on a combination of the online screen, temperature, symptom checks, as well as antibody tests.
David, one thing that came up from our esteemed panel as they're heading each of their respective, from software to contact center association to game developers to animation, hundreds of thousands, millions of Filipinos under their associations. One thing is fulfilling. I mean, there's two things. It's operationally fulfilling and making sure that their workforce doesn't get decimated by an outbreak. That's probably the most important thing. Two is also government compliance. So with regards to government compliance, are you able to comment on to what extent your scope of solutions is able to comply with government regulations?
Sure. The key aspect of government compliance we have to deal with, and we support, by the way, is that all antibody testing needs to be reported back to the DOH, at least at an anonymous level. And remember, part of the thinking behind modified quarantine is they want to lock down certain barangays or certain sections based on COVID outbreaks. So the way that we can assist with that is if we're monitoring company and we're doing antibody testing, then we will anonymously sort of send information back about the location of the people that have come back COVID positive as far as antibodies. Then they need to go to confirmatory testing. So it's just an early indicator of hotspots, because what they're effectively looking for, what are the hotspots that we need to manage so that we can go in and take a closer look at those hotspots.
So thank you, David. At this point, I want to throw it back to to our panel. Does any of this trigger any questions or inspirations from your end?
Hey, Andre, this is Jonathan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually very interested in what Xenia is doing. To a point wherein, as my own company, as Spring Valley, endorsed by some of my friends here, the Game Developers Association of the Philippines, the Animation Council, and obviously the Philippine Software Industry Association. I think there's some sort of a match because we actually launched a platform called Clear, which is the Citizens Logistics and Early Assessment Report, which is primarily a contact tracing tool. So we use both Bluetooth and GPS. We actually have 7 local government units signed up already and about 4 companies. So maybe we could take it offline later on because I could see a lot of synergy in what was being discussed earlier.
So David, just for context, Jonathan here is the president of the Software Association of the Philippines, Software Developers Association of the Philippines. So that's a good synergy. I wonder if from the point of view of Jojo Oligan, who's the president of the Contact Centers Association of the Philippines, which holds the lion's share of 1.4 million jobs, does this kind of solution get us closer to solving the pain points that you brought up earlier?
I think it's more on the there's the testing, right? Because we have a lot of our folks representing about 67-70% of the BPO industry. That's around about 850,000 workers. Definitely the safety of our employees is our priority, right? So when they come back, to your point, David, if they commute to the office, you don't know whether the driver has COVID or whoever that they will interact with, right? And I think it's been a discussion whether are we going to subject everyone to testing before we ask them to go back to the office. I guess that's a question that we need to answer, but definitely there's we need to balance if that is something that the industry or the different company can do, right? Meaning who will be paying for those test kits?
So I figured, Jojo, when you mentioned can do, it was like who's gonna pay for this, right?
Yeah.
Is there a sense in the industry right now, Jojo, that with regards to the 850,000 contact center employees from our Filipino workforce, it's kind of an all or nothing thing, right? Either you're cleared or you're not cleared, and there seems to be no middle ground. right?
Yeah.
So if you're
Yeah.
cleared, you can continue to work and service demand and therefore take care of your family. Or there's no way for us to clear you because there's no clear system, infrastructure, operations, or payer to clear you. So therefore, you remain on the bench, and therefore you cannot service demand and you cannot
Yeah.
continue to take care of your family. That's
Yeah.
it's an
I mean,
yeah.
right. Going back to my one of my problem statement earlier, right? On the clear guidelines on how do we do this thing, right? What the process that we need to take. We need to understand that aside from those testing kits, we also need to make sure that we do regular cleaning or disinfection of our facilities, right? So preventive measure will always continue. And then we're going to be practicing social distancing in the office, which means our capability to operate will be cut by what, 30, 40, or 50% because of social distancing.
Right.
So all of that, so there's a lot of consideration. We want to do work at home, but a good portion of our labor workers doesn't have good infrastructure in their home, which
Right.
even if they want to work at home, they can't. Even if you provide them with Wi-Fi dongles from companies, the signal is not that stable that they can still not operate. So
Right.
there,
Right.
there are a lot of those problems. Cost-wise, of course, to balance, it's not just this thing will be over in a month or so, right? So
Yeah.
expenses will continue to go up. So we need to balance between surviving, operating in the country versus, at the end of the day, you can no longer take it. You just shut down the company and you leave people unemployed. Definitely, it's not the way we wanted to do.
Right. Right. Thank you, Georgia, for that very, very grounded, hard-nosed update. Thank you, David, too, and Jonathan. Greg Kittleson, can we call you
Yes,
up?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Greg, from your perch being the biggest in Southeast Asia provider of scalable office spaces, are you able to offer any kind of solutions? And disclaimer here, unlike Xenia, I am not involved with AMC at all. I'm not an investor. So this is just an honest to goodness question. A guy who provides scalable office spaces, what kind of answers are you seeing from your end?
We're waiting for Greg to waive all the rental fee.
It's
Greg, well, say hi.
we're in a tough situation because we're kind of wedged between our clients, tenants, and the landlords. So you can imagine the types of conversations we've been having for the past 45 days. It's been tough. But anyways, just to clarify that we're one of the largest in Southeast Asia. We're the largest in the Philippines in terms of co-working space, flexible workspace, serviced office, if you will. But the majority of our tenants, of our clients, are IT BPO companies, some type of back office operation. So a number have different needs. And I think, what Dan, Jojo are part of this industry. So, I mean, a lot of what they would have said, I would agree with. The situation is the following. Our own staff, our internal staff of KMC Solutions, which is hundreds of people that report to an office here in BGC, we are going to be implementing the social distancing. It'll be one direction walking around the office, not two. Disinfection, of course, UV lighting as well. And the disinfection will be like hospital grade disinfection happening all the time. It will be initially to start out 50-50. So 50% of the employees will work from the office, ideally, and 50% will work from home, and that'll be a week period. And then we'll make the switch every week. That's ideally, but you might have some employees that say, listen, I don't want to go to the office. And of course you cannot force them given the situation. And it's pretty similar with a number of our clients and tenants. They don't want to bring everybody back. They want to bring some people back. Some of them as well want to keep a good amount of people at home, but give them access to, let's say, a co-working space. So as opposed to coming back to the office at a KMC office in a 50, 100-seater room, private room, they say, we're going to put half of them there, half of them will work from home, but we also want to give them access in any of the KMC co-working areas where they have the ability to work essentially from home and from a co-working space when they need that solid internet connection and human interaction. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Got it. Thanks. Thank you, Greg. At this point, anybody else from our audience who has from coming on from their solo workout has another perspective when it comes to BPO? Floor is open. Okay, so if nothing else, we'll go back to our panel. So guys, what do you think? Where are you sniffing out the opportunities? Which is, of course, another way of saying, you know, in this market, given the sensitivities all around us, to say we're sniffing out opportunities is really to say that we're sniffing out ways to stay relevant and to continue to serve. Based on our exchange today, Jonathan, Jojo, Alvin, Dan, Miguel, Butch, where would you say your energies and your excitement? You know, in these days, we need leaders who can still get excited despite everything else. What are you most excited about in terms of where the opportunities are to continue to stay relevant and to serve? Yeah, Jonathan.
Andre, because my other companions are quite shy. Okay, so I'll just take this one.
All right.
Okay. I'm actually writing a white paper, and one of the components of that is what I call ADD. Okay, it's accelerated digital disruption. Those that are a little bit iffy in terms of going the route of digitalization have no choice anymore. So I think that's a golden opportunity. One of the asks that we're putting in front of government right now as the PSIA is that number one, to actually compel, especially government institutions, to digitize most of their delivery and functions, and give priority to Philippine software companies. Because the problem is, even if we find the cure, most of the market has contracted. If you're a software company that is, let's say, servicing a US airline company, regardless of how prepared you are to do the service, if your main client is actually in harm's way when it comes to their own survival, then there's nothing to talk about when it comes to either maintaining your current contracts or growing your current contracts. So again, my efforts right now is actually to create other markets. So even my conversations with government officials, I always tell them, let's not, contrary to what Alvin is saying, and he's going to kill me for this, but let's not develop the talent anymore as far as software, because I feel that there's a lot more floating around now, and we could see this with all of the cross applications that are happening between PSIA companies. But spend the money in actually developing new markets if we are indeed going to stick with the services. One thing that I'd really like to pick the brains of our panelists and my friends is, would it make sense to actually have some sort of adjustment in terms of price points, given the fact that, one, the service providers in the Philippines right now, regardless of which IT BPM sector, is actually assuming a much larger cost base because of all of the things that are required and that are necessary. The price points for practically all services has been slowly creeping down, primarily because of commercialization, and then there's AI and automation. But could this be the reset button that we're actually looking for in terms of renegotiating price points, especially for those geographies that are still up and about and would still need the services coming out of the Philippines?
So, Jonathan, let me comment on that. I made a rough estimate. In fact, the way I see it, if we do continue, say, for example, work at home, it'll be more expensive here. Why? One, the people need to invest in connectivity, and the minimum connectivity they need to pay for is like what, about $50, $50 per month. Second, a lot of our Filipino workers doesn't have computers, so they need to invest. So you need to, right? Not all have laptops or desktop that required or that will fit them to work at home, right? Third, there because they do work from home, enabling them will with technology and everything which we have, but it's still expensive at the moment, right? We're gonna spend us more rather than we have everything in our offices. Imagine you're gonna headsets. It's another investment that the agents need to do. But I'm not saying it's not doable, but maybe it's expensive right now. It's similar to when we started with the Avaya of the world, right? Those machines are huge investment on our end, but eventually became cheaper. Again, it's more expensive primarily because it's new. But I think once we're able to adapt, like for example, in your association, be able to develop certain applications that will be used by the different companies that outsource to the contact center space that requires lesser bandwidth, then the cost of connectivity will go down, right?
Joe, I think you also need to add to the list is the testing requirements. Like,
Yes,
the cheapest test that's out there, and anybody could correct me on this one, is probably about 1,800 pesos. And you need at least two per employee. So could you imagine the biggest member that I have is Accenture, which is about 48,000 people.
right.
Just do the math, right? I mean,
Yeah,
times two, times 1.8. So,
correct,
that's the
correct.
cost that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's one.
So,
And there's several
gentlemen,
factors. And even if they work at home, for example, they remotely access another PC in the office.
yeah,
Again, because
Right.
of certain,
Right.
I guess, limitations, I would say, in technology. But then again, I'm not going to be surprised that we can overcome that eventually. But there are four things, no, that we need to do to Andre's question. One, I would say, people people need to adapt. People need to change. People need to accept the change in the behavior, the way they work. And again, going to Filipinos, and I'm also Filipino, right? There's just a lot of distraction at home. We need to make sure that we are professional, that we know our integrity. That when say we're gonna work for 8 hours, we're really gonna work for 8 hours, not take 2 hours on break and pretend that you have internet problem or so on and so forth. Right? People get creative. So that's one thing that we need to change our mindset, the way we live, the way we work, the way we approach this. The second is on education. To Alvin point, we need to educate our folks, and a lot of education in our industry, to be very specific. I mean, to all our industries, like in the BPO space, there's a lot of educations that need to happen in terms of upskilling or making sure that our labor force have the skill set to do it. The third is on government regulations. On government regulations, there are regulations in the government that needs to be updated for us to be able to continue work at home, right?
Okay.
There's just simply there's a lot, and it's part of my problem on clear-cut guidelines because, you know, there's no really clear-cut guidelines on how you operate at home. They'll say you operate work at home, but this much, but giving you not enough, I would say, time to prepare for it, to activate it, and so forth and so on. And then fourth will be infrastructure. As a country, we need to update our infrastructure for us to be able to adapt to the new technology and to the new norm that everyone's talking about. Hybrid work at home plus on-site operation. So that's it for me.
Plus transportation.
Plus
Plus
transportation.
transportation.
So between Jojo and Jonathan, and I'd like to preface this by thanking you both for that great exchange. Jojo's 4 points actually is a good setup for us to wind down the last 10 minutes of this CEO challenge. which is, so I'll go back to Jojo's 4 points. A lot of those are policy statements, etc. The particular hat, the particular lens with which we conduct the 100-hour challenge is from the point of view not of pundits or opinion makers, not of policy makers, but of leaders who act. So when we consider the last 2 hours of exchange and we take on the particular role of leaders who act, let me pass the buck back to each of our guest speakers and ask you again and pose to you again this ultimate question, which is what the 100 Hours Launchpad is all about. If you, wearing the hat of somebody who acts, understanding that punditry is not acting, policy is not acting, if you were going to start something, a project, a startup, a pivot on your business or your association, what would it be right now, given the realities of the new normal that we face? What would you act on? What would you start in a way that does two things? It provides value to the market, so it is an act of service, but at the same time, it is not charity. It is an act of creating value that is sustainable. Therefore, it is a business move. That is what 100 Hours CEO Challenge is all about. So what would you act on? Let me trigger this off by passing the baton on to Jonathan De Luzuriaga, president of the Software Developers Association of the Philippines, because I do appreciate the point that you mentioned that this is a moment in time, a moment in history where perhaps we need to do our part with government, but with or without government, to pounce on the situation where the mandate from the for the private sector to go digitize, is clear and is a clear and present imperative. What can we do to force, Jonathan, from your point of view, with the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of software developers, if we can compel and clearly push Philippine corporations to digitize, what amount of work, you don't even have to look overseas, what amount of work would there be for the Software Developers Association of the Philippines? So what would you do, Jonathan? And then you pass the baton on to the next person.
So I think Dave will agree with me on this one. No, the level of data management going down to the LGU level, to the barangay, is really laughable at this point. So that's a very huge opportunity there. If we could just harness, the power of the software development industry and actually make it meet with the local requirements, even just on governance alone, I think that would really jumpstart the economy again. My main pain point right now, Andre, really is with the markets really collapsing, including the stock markets. How do you now go back to being productive as an industry? So that's primarily where I think we could that's the shortest point from point A to point B. On the second piece, I'm actually quite surprised that when we did our planning at Spring Valley way back late 2019, I didn't actually have to throw the entire strategic plan, because what I've been harping on in terms of let's create a place that could be the home for technology and innovation, let's create Filipino products and so on and so forth. Right now, what happened as far as COVID-19 is concerned, it actually gave me a lot of leverage in terms of the message that I've been trying to preach for the past 4 or 5 years.
I think leverage in the current situation, with exact regard to what you're saying, is spot on, Jonathan. I think you're a brilliant guy.
Thank
You
you.
obviously agree. um, but my point is, you know the build, build, build program, right? It's
Yeah.
infrastructure, it's physical infrastructure. What
Yes.
if government, given what happened, were to build, 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 not on physical infrastructure, but on digital infrastructure? Would that not revive the economy?
Well, the big black eye that we're facing here is the absence of a national ID system, and even the president of the republic has mentioned that in some of his late night speeches.
Among
So
many other things that could be digitized that have been made uh, very obviously and painfully apparent in this time and place. You talked about leverage. I think we have leverage now to push digitalization, not at the industry scale, not at the fucking thought leader scale, but at a nationwide scale,
right, right.
comparable to the build, build, build infrastructure program. And if BBB is supposed to create jobs and restart economies, why not a digitally focused BBB that leverages this current situation? So if you're
Let's
game for that, we're going to work on that with you.
I'm 100% in. Let's call it DDD. Digitize, digitize, digitize. Right.
To go right along with BBB. Very good, Jonathan. I want to thank you. So who do we pass the baton on to next?
We'll give it to the godfather of the IT BPM industry, Mr. Dan Reyes.
Dan. So what if you had one project, a pivot, a startup, a new venture, or what would you work on, boots on the ground, that creates value, that heals pains in the BPO sector in the new normal?
Yep. So I go back and we've actually started on this, which is basically that working together with Jonathan, who is that clear application or that can actually work with probably maybe later on, David, we can talk about it. But it's really a system or a tool that can get our workers back to work. And I think that's going to be critical later on.
Dan, CLEAR is an acronym, right? Could you spell it out for us again?
Jonathan?
Citizens Logistics and Early Assessment Report.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I would highly suggest that we get in touch. Well, in fact, I'm not going to suggest it. I'm going to put you guys in touch with David Ford of Xenia, and let's see where because you guys have the scale of network access.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what you guys can do with David. So Dan, I agree. That's a great, very specific, very pointed solution that addresses a very clear and present problem. So Dan, I want to thank you again. Who do we pass the baton on to next?
No other than Jojo Ligan.
Jojo, what are you going to be working on?
Favorite mo ko, Dan, No, I think at the end of the day, it all boils down to people, right? And the main problem why this ECQ is extended and why we're having this is, people. I would say it's CCC, comply. We need to work on education and making sure every Filipino really comply, understand the situation, so we can work together, because there's so much opportunity out there for us. And because we're in the service industry and our business is people having the right skills is not enough, but people having the right attitude about certain things and how we can work together and take advantage of those skill set that we have by complying and following regulations, so we can definitely increase our work at home is very, very important. So working with the academe on those things.
Jojo, did I hear you right that you think our ability to, as a people, as a workforce, work from home effectively is a function not just of infrastructure hurdles, but of cultural and behavioral hurdles? Did I hear you right?
Yeah. That's our. And we have, infrastructure we can fix it, right? Technology is there. Jonathan and team be able to do it. Everyone, right? but the behavioral aspect, our attitude, our culture, we need to adjust. We need to accept what's the reality out there, right? And I think thanks to, I don't know if it's the right statement, if I will say thanks to COVID, that we're able to understand now the behavior of our folks. People, there are people who just don't, and I'm not saying everyone, but there are people who just don't say appreciate what each of the different companies are doing. Instead of working with the different companies, and not just for our industry, right? I mean, we can see this kind of behavior across different industries. Instead of helping and working together, keeps on complaining, right? I mean, everyone's hit with this pandemic. I guess we're all surprised about what happened, and we need everyone to work together for us to be able to fix things. And even government is seeing this, right? In terms of people not really complying with the social distancing, with wearing of masks, following the laws. And it pains me every time you go abroad, and I'm sure everyone here, when you go abroad, you go to Singapore, to be very specific, every Filipino will follow the rule on the dot. When we go back to the Philippines, it's just okay to not to follow the rules. I mean, I don't know why, right?
Okay. Jojo, thank you for that. Who's next?
So I can jump
Okay.
in real quick. I can jump in quick. Greg of GMCT. So one of the main things is the health of our employees, right? So like I said before, we are disinfecting everything, getting people back to work. We're starting out at 50%. So for our own internal company, KMC, our employees, we most likely will be using the Xenia solution for corporate health, but also influencing or introducing that solution to some of our clients and tenants as well in other offices. We're also, KMC Solutions is creating a new product called Casa by KMC, and this is just what we spoke of the working from home. So actually going into our clients, employees' homes, and setting up a solid desk, solid chair, laptop, docking station, noise cancellation, headphones, business grade DSL, screen check time usage to ensure productivity, cloud HR, payroll, attendance, device recovery, remote wipe and protection. So it's about helping the clients and tenants we have with employees working from home and making sure that the clients and tenants and employees that are coming back are safe.
Thanks, Greg. All right. Who's gonna go next? Greg.
Let's give it to Butch.
All right, Butch.
Okay. I guess what am I going to be working on? We are a small company. We are about, in relative terms, we are about, 800 employees today, compared to the 65,000 that, a Lorna would probably have or a Concentrix would have. So our needs are also different. When you think about, it is hard for us actually without a, on the ground sales force to really make the sale. It makes it a lot tougher today with all companies, in dire straits actually in the US, which is primarily where our market is. And all the other English-speaking countries of the world, it makes it a little harder sell, and to some degree, a little bit tone deaf, to try to really push for sales in a time like this. But at the end of the day, we as a small company, we really need to produce sales. So how are we going to do that? I guess the concentration that I would have is really rather than going into an intermediary. For example, we would work for a company in the States that actually worked for a healthcare company, or working for a hospital that actually catered to the patients. Going more direct. In other words, perhaps moving more towards digitalization of products that we could actually sell, and having people be more directly involved with those products, like what I had actually mentioned earlier. If you look at 76 million baby boomers, that's a fairly large market. So really looking for markets today would be our focus.
Butch, to your point earlier had been your stakeholder and their pains had been older people who are sick alone, dying alone, correct? And
That
you
is
were saying, meanwhile, we have a couple of gazillion Filipinos here on our side that could be talking over to them. So think about it as maybe an Uber for not being alone, right? In Uber, you need a ride. There's somebody to provide you a ride. In your marketplace, you're saying, hey, I'm about to die alone, or I'm just alone. I'm sick alone. I'm just alone. Can I talk to somebody? Because, hey, my family can't talk to me, blah, 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 whatever. Something like that, right?
right, and it's inducing.
You could call it boomer. Just call it boomer, not Uber. Okay.
All right.
Really introducing this basically the Filipino culture. I mean, I actually I'm Filipino. I grew up here, but spent 30 years in the States. So half of my life has actually been living in the United States and working for a Fortune 200. I guess the one thing about living in the States and the culture in America compared to the culture that we have here, family is a little bit more close-knit in the Philippines, right? So to some degree, I really would hate to look at people, elderly, living in a home and dying alone, right? So if there was a way by which you could actually touch their lives, which is really, when you think about it, towards the end of their life, and invoke that family culture that we have, that would be a fantastic thing, right?
I think Butch, I think you're onto something there. Beyond the immediate scope of the target zone you had zeroed in on, which is perhaps connecting people on the other side of the world who are dying alone, who are sick alone, who are just alone, with our culture here of giving comfort and solace like family to people like this. I think the broader scope is this new normal has shifted tectonic plates and has therefore sprouted new opportunities, such as yours being one example. And we can sniff out these opportunities. There's nothing wrong with selling things right now, because the dirty little secret Butch with selling something is that means you're creating value in a time and place where value is needed. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's in fact what this 100-hour launch pad is all about. So Butch, with thanks to you, who shall we pass the baton on to next?
I guess I'll pass it on to Miguel.
Miguel, animation. What are you guys working on? Yeah.
Well, I'll just take it from where I left off. Essentially, it's to put up this again, to put these artists back to work, and that form will be similar to Jonathan's suggestion, which would be self-contained facilities, because that's the next best thing to work from home. So I'm already in touch with the government for that, and I'm trying to tell them, listen, the creative industry has always been sort of like a forgotten industry in the country, and I think that's quite sad because it's one of our strengths. It's such a natural for the Philippines, for its artistry and its creativity in general. So just going back to animation, put them back into work in those self-contained facilities, energize them with bandwidth and software and hardware, and make sure that we don't lose the clients. And given this time right now, where it's a reset and it's sort of like in a race where the pace car comes in front, the leader loses his edge, right? So now everyone is stacked together, and it's time for us to level up and take advantage of this and show our wares and capability.
I think if that's, I believe, Miguel, that what you're talking about is the physical infrastructure that transcends just COVID, right? Maybe it's made more pronounced by COVID, but there is a need. As you said, the demand is out there. And maybe you should butt heads with, for example, Greg Kittleson here of KMC to understand how to create these kinds of spaces that will make Filipino professionals be able to service this kind of demand that's globally continues to flow our way. If only we could create the proper physical working infrastructure for the kind of talent that we have. So Miguel, thank you. Who's it going to be next?
Thank you. Alvin.
Alvin, you're up. Yeah.
Okay, so well, I'm gonna go back actually to all our academic members and see if we can do launch an effort with the basic idea of us game developers serving as directors to provide a solution. The actual workforce that I want to have in developing educational content are actually the students. You see, the thing with, from what I know of our studentry, the people studying game development, they're lucky enough to also have machines at home. And right now, if they're at home and I have to check what they're actually being assigned to by the schools. If it's still cloudy, maybe this project can help make these groups per school, because I believe the educational content per school should be just for that school and built by people of that school. And maybe this example can scale up by building other groups for other schools and build their content and provide a new way of consuming it.
Very well said. So taking lessons from our particular industry and applying it to other groups.
Yep.
I think, Alvin, that's been your contribution to this session.
Yes,
so, do we have anybody else left? I believe you are last but not least. Correct? Yes, indeed. So, on that note, Miguel, parting words based on what the expanse of guests and thinking that we saw today. A most compelling group. What do you think, Miguel? What's your...
Well, it as compared to maybe other industries, there is some level of them being ready for this type of thing. I mean, so I like their proactiveness actually in terms of like how they're approaching this. The use of leveraging technology as well is really, well, something that I'm a big believer of. But of course, it has to be anchored on actual, needs. And we surface a lot of interesting needs from like different sectors in the BPO industry. So I mean, I'd love to see some of these see the light of day actually, and hopefully we can all keep in touch.
Well, as you know well, in Ignite, we don't rely on hope. We will be in touch with these gentlemen. Most compelling bunch. I have to say,
Yeah.
all the warnings that I got in the last 24, 48 hours about what a rowdy group these guys would be and how uncontrollable they might be have been, like in Mark Twain's words, a little bit exaggerated. It was Mark Twain who said, rumors of my death have been grossly exaggerated. So rumors about these guys' unrowdiness have been grossly exaggerated. They have been a wonderful bunch. Gave us a lot of insights, ideas about what needs to happen in terms of action, ventures, startups, initiatives, projects, pivots in the 1.4 million strong Filipino workforce that is encompassed by the BPO sector. So on that note, on behalf of our team, on behalf of Miguel, I want to express my sincerest thanks for our CEO challengers tonight, and I best express that. Okay, we're gonna stay in touch with you guys. This is Andre and Miguel and the rest of Ignite House signing off. Thanking you and
Thank you. It's great having you.
looking forward to carrying on with you. We will be in touch. We're serious about execution. So Dan, Jonathan, Jojo, Alvin, Miguel, Butch, we will be in touch. We wish you all the best in terms of all the great work that you're doing on behalf of millions of Filipinos. We hope to work with you to make these things happen. We will be in touch. It's the order of battle.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Boomer.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a drink.
We will.
Cheers. I finished mine already.